Traveling Home by Abdul Hakim Murad. I read this book, and in there's a chapter called Islamophobia and the Bosnian War. After reading this chapter and the whole book, I read another book, Bosnia, A Short History by Noel Malcolm. The book provides a brief history of the people of Bosnia. For me, the most shocking part was the Bosnian church, or the Bogomils. Now, we're talking about a time when Europe was split in half. You had the Orthodox and you had the Catholics. And for whatever reason, I really don't know, and it's quite fascinating to me to this day, is that the Bosnian church, or the Bogomils, were very, very different for either of them. And they believed they didn't believe in a priest or such, and their churches were just small houses on top of a mountain, and they would pray to God directly. And the other fascinating thing for me is that they didn't actually believe in the crucifixion of Jesus. But Europe being the way it was, the Bosnian people, or the Bogomils, were persecuted by the Catholics as well as the Orthodox. And when Islam was introduced by the Ottomans, I really think the Bosnians, or the Bogomils, find it quite easy to accept Islam, as Muslims don't believe in the crucifixion of Jesus either. So in this whole Balkan region, this place happens to have a majority of Muslims. Obviously, the conversion process took its time. It wasn't like the Ottomans came over and instantly everyone just became a Muslim. It was really the works of the Darweshis and the Takkis, or back in South Asia, it was the Pirs, or the holy men, the Sufi, whatever you want to call them, in the Khanqahs, that kind of spread Islam, especially in the region of Punjab and Bengal. So a very similar kind of thing happened here as well. And a lot of the people became Muslim, and things were relatively peaceful. But the Ottoman Empire began to decline, and you have the Austro-Hungarian Empire expanding. When the Hungarians did take over this region, most people continued with business as usual. They continued to have their autonomy, and everything was fine. And then you have this guy, Ferdinand or something his name was, who got assassinated by a Serbian. And you have this First World War that broke out. But another fascinating thing that I found from this book is that it was the Germans that wanted to kick off the war, and it wasn't the Hungarians. Hungarians were like, you know what, let's look into it. They're trying to negotiate with the Orthodox, with the Serbs. Like, they really didn't want to escalate things any further, but it was the Germans that were pushing for the war, and eventually it did kick off. After the First World War kicking off, obviously this place got ransacked, and then you had the World War kicking off soon after that. After the Second World War, what happened was this region fell under communism, you could say, and this guy called Tito comes into rise, and he creates something called Yugoslavia, and you have communism or socialism in place, so no religion, nothing is allowed. And that's when these people, the Bosniaks, kind of drive away from Islam and their practices, and they become more towards, say, atheism, and they begin to lose their religious identity. Fast forward to the 90s, Yugoslavia is breaking down after Tito's death, and the capital of this Yugoslavia was Serbia, Belgrade. And these other countries, these other nations pop up, and everyone gets their independence. And in Bosnia, they have an election, a referendum, and my man, Alija Izetbegovic, wins the referendum, and he's voted the president of Bosnia. But Milosevic and his lot from Serbia don't accept this because they are Muslims, and there's no other reason for it. Even though it's shown that they're Bosnians and Bosnia shouldn't exist, is purely because they're Muslims, and they launch an attack. The saddest thing, and what really enables this genocide to take place, is that Western powers put an arms embargo on the Bosnians. So no weapons or anything is allowed in that region, and Bosnians don't have anything to defend themselves, i.e. the Muslims don't have anything to defend themselves. So you have the Serb Orthodox that are smashing the Muslims up because they've got all the weapons, they've got everything they want, because that was the capital of Yugoslavia. They got all the resources. And on top of that, you had people from Canada or America going over and paying the Serbs to just kill Muslims for the fun of it. They were just assassinating Muslims, playing games and stuff like that, like you're watching the movies like the Hunger Games and things like that. That's what they were doing actually at the time. Anyway, at some point, the arms embargo is lifted, and the Bosnians do manage to get some weapon and everything. They fight back. They do an amazing job. And, willy-nilly, you have America, Britain, and the others kind of give them a little bit of support. So they win their fight, they gain their independence after 3 years of, massacre. It was a horrible time for these people. It was really, really bad. It was a genocide like the one that's taking place right now in Gaza. I can't say which one was worse. Any genocide is just as bad as the other. However, it was another genocide committed against the Muslims by factions of non-Muslims, whether Catholics, whether Orthodox, Christians, atheists, whatever it was. It was really a genocide committed on Muslims. And through this communism, after the break of this communism, this nationalism that takes place, and that was the other very disturbing thing for me, is that these, so the Catholic Bosniaks that lived in Bosnia for centuries had no problem, and likewise for the Orthodox Bosniaks. But after this creation of nationalism, what happens? These Catholics, they begin to identify themselves as Croats, and the Orthodox begin to identify themselves as Serbs, and they begin to turn against their own people. And this is what nationalism does. Nationalism creates this kind of division based on anything, religion, a pseudo ethnicity, and and that's where you have a people turn against their own people. So all these Bosniaks, whether Muslim, Catholic, or Orthodox, are Bosniaks, but the other two decide to identify themselves as Croats and Catholic, Croats and Serbs, and they hit on the Muslims. And the Muslims are the only ones that are identified as Bosniaks now. So in Bosnia, you have a free tier government, if you want to call it. So you have a Croat government who are actually Catholic Bosniaks, and you have the Serb um, Bosniaks who are actually Orthodox Bosniaks, and you have the Bosniaks who are just Muslims. Now, distinguishedly, like the Muslims are the only Bosniaks going back to the time of the Bogomils. That's how it appears. But actually, they're all really Bosniaks, and the other two Serbs and the Croats are just playing a game. And that's the real sad thing about it. But however, in my visit there, I had an amazing time. Most of the people that I met were Muslim, probably a few handful of maybe Catholic or Catholic or Orthodox. I didn't really ask. I was a bit scared to ask anyone about that. Best way to find out is by asking their names. That's how you could tell if they're a Muslim or not. So people in general are lovely, very helpful. Every time I ask for help, people help me out. Some cases, people are out their way to help me out. However, I urge Muslims to visit this lovely country. Food is halal, masjids everywhere. So yeah, just pop over and check it out.